Chris Kaba was a core member of a notorious South London gang and accused of being the gunman in an alleged bid to murder a rival in a nightclub shooting days before he was killed. The 24-year-old's gang links, previous convictions and violent pasts can be reported for the first time after the Met Police marksman Martyn Blake was cleared of murder and the judge, Mr Justice Goss, lifted reporting restrictions. Brandon Malutshi was shot twice in the leg with a revolver as Kaba opened fire on the dance floor of the Oval Space in Hackney in East London and on the road outside as the victim tried to escape in the early hours of the 30th of August 2022. Kaba, known by his street name Itch, had arrived at the scene in the same Audi Q8 he was driving on the night of the 5th of September 2022 when he was shot in the head by Mr Blake as he tried to escape from police in Streatham in South London. The same vehicles linked to a shooting in Bromley in South East London on 22nd of May 2022 in which two people were targeted with a shotgun, the Old Bailey heard in legal argument not in front of the jury in Mr Blake's murder trial. The Audi was also used as one of the getaway vehicles the night before Kaba was killed after three masked men fired a shotgun twice at unknown targets outside of Brixton School. But they didn't know Kaba was found with a balaclava in his pocket and gunshot residue on his sleeve when he was shot, although prosecutors suggested it may have come from one of the firearms officers. No weapons were found in the Audi, which was not registered to Kaba, although he was one of the known drivers. A handgun was discovered on the 14th of September 2022 by cleaners behind the bins of a property along the route he took before he was killed, but the weapon is not thought to be linked to the incident. Kaba was due to face a civil court hearing 10 days after his death, where police would make an application for a gang injunction used to place restrictions on people involved in gang violence. He'd previously been subject of an interim revision of the order, but it had elapsed whilst he was in prison for other convictions. Mr Blake's barrister, Patrick Gibbs KC, had argued bad character evidence relating to Kaba should be put before the jury in the murder case, but the application was refused by the judge because it wasn't deemed relevant to the issue in the case, as the officer didn't know Kaba was driving the car or that he had been linked to a shooting the night before. The judge rejected an application made on behalf of Kaba's mother to extend reporting restrictions beyond the end of the trial. Mr Blake's barrister, Patrick Gibbs, described Kaba as the principal gunman of the Brixton Hill-based 6-7 gang, which has more than 50 known members. A police report submitted to the court as part of an unsuccessful bid to keep the anonymity of the officer, previously known as NX121, described the group as an identifiable street gang. The gang is in an active and violent dispute with rival factions of street gangs, including numerous firearms discharges, stabbings and murders, which has played out in gang-related music since 2014. Kaba had appeared in drill rap videos with other 6-7 members online. He said its members are embedded in a culture of drug supplying, serious violence, firearms and knife possession, and are part of the highest harm street gang in Lambeth. The prosecutor said there was a specific intelligence to indicate there was a risk to Blake's life because the gang might seek to identify and murder him as revenge for the fatal shooting of Kaba. So Kaba's previous convictions dated back to when he was 13 for offences including stabbing with intent to cause GBH, a knife-enabled gang assault where the victim was stabbed and had his arm broken, and 2 other knife offences. In 2015, when he was 17, Kaba was convicted of affray and possession of an offensive weapon, which is a belt, over the incident in which a revolver-style handgun was recovered nearby, but the weapon wasn't linked to him and he was never charged in connection with it. He was jailed for 4 years after being convicted of possessing an imitation firearm in 2017, and in August 2020 he was handed a 5-month prison sentence for failing to stop and possession of a knife which was discarded from a vehicle. So, had he not been killed, Kaba would have stood trial for the attempted murder of Malutshi, who was affiliated with a Wandsworth Road-based 1-7 gang along with 6 other men. His name was on the indictment at the Old Bailey trial early this year, where it was agreed fact that Kaba was a core member of the 6-7 gang, but his role in the attack after the Nottingham Carnival couldn't be reported until the end of Mr Blake's trial. A witness said Kaba, who was wearing a balaclava, was moving mad as he identified his ops for pulling the gun out of a bag smuggled into the club by Marcus Pottinger. Malutshi was shot on the busy dance floor then again as Kaba chased him as he fled into a side street, suffering wounds to his left and right thighs. Kaba left the scene in the back of a Range Rover, while Shamar Bell, also known as Bones because of his dog bone necklace, drove the Audi away to Kaba to collect later. Bell was jailed for 10 years and Pottinger for 9 years after they were found guilty of ruining with intent to cause GBH in possession of a firearm to cause fear of violence. Having sentenced the men, Judge Simon Mayo KC said, "Having spotted Malutshi in the nightclub, I am sure that Kaba decided he would confront him and shoot him." Cornell Bamgboy, nicknamed C-Rose or Cons, whose passport was found in the Audi in the night Kaba was shot, was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison after he was convicted of the firearms offence. Bamgboy, who was also stopped in the Audi by armed police in the first half of 2022, was convicted with Kaba in 2015 over a 9-man fight, and they were both later involved in a gang altercation at an unlicensed music event in Romford. Kaba was stabbed in the stomach whilst Bamgboy and another person were injured in a shooting when a row erupted. And guys, now I'm going to go into how the police marksman, Mr Blake, was acquitted of murder. A Scotland Yard marksman was acquitted of murder today after shooting dead a fleeing motorist to stop him running over colleagues.
Doors. Shots fired! First aid!
Martyn Blake was dramatically cleared after being accused of shooting dead Chris Kaba, who's 24 years old, without justification, to stop the suspect escaping police. After the verdict was announced, dramatic video revealed the moment Blake shot Mr Kaba through a car windscreen in Setham, South London, before shouts of shots fired, wherefrom on first aid could be heard. The CPS released the extraordinary footage featuring police body cam footage from multiple angles which show the chaotic scenes. The clip shows armed officers running towards Mr Kaba's car, which was hemmed in by marked and unmarked police cars, with shouts of doors heard. This was followed by 2 officers screaming of armed police, "Show me your hands," then wheel spin could be heard as Mr Kaba drove the Audi backwards and forwards. An officer next to the car again shouted, "Show me your hands," and a horn beeps before a shot is heard, and someone shouts, "Right, we've got shots fired." A cry of where from is then heard before someone answers, "Round the front," followed by frantic shouts of first aid. The clip also features a map compiled by the Independent Office of Police Conduct showing where all the officers in the vehicles are located at all times. In an extraordinary case which has profound implications for national security, hundreds of firearms officers around the country downed their weapons in protest after the officer was charged, as colleagues argued that he was just trying to save them from Mr Kaba. The fatal shooting happened after armed police started tailing the vehicle that Mr Kaba was driving because the Audi Q8 had been used as a getaway car in a gang-related shooting the night before in Brixton in South London. When police boxed in the vehicle in a residential street in Streatham, Mr Kaba used the car, reversing into police cars before accelerating to parked cars in a desperate bid to escape. Seemingly, as he revved back and forth in the Audi, police officers shot him. It must be said that he was not armed. So this murder charge, it sparked fury amongst firearms officers, with dozens downing their tools in an apparent protest and the army being put on standby to plug the gap. A fierce debate erupted about how police marksmen should be held to account after taking a fatal shot, with warnings that officers could be put off volunteering to undergo firearms training for fear of being embroiled in lengthy legal battles. Prosecutors announced that Mr Blake would be charged with murder of the fatal shooting of Chris Kaba in September last year. As I said, he's been cleared of his murder. In the wake of the decision, one of the country's most senior police officers, Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley, claimed in an interview that marksmen would prefer to confront a person related to any terror offences than a gangland criminal because there would be less of a legal backlash. And he also took aim at justice campaign groups, stating that it startled me, as I've had some of our firearms officers say to me they would rather confront terror individuals rather than street gangsters. The then Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, commissioned a government review of how firearms officers should be held to account, with suggestions that officers would quit their roles if they were dissatisfied with the outcome. So come back to the case, and today the Crown Prosecution Service is facing questions about why it brought the landmark case after jurors took just 3 hours to acquit Blake. During the trial lasting nearly 3 weeks, a succession of officers claimed they would have shot Mr Kaba if Blake had not acted. A fellow firearms officer known as DS87 said he would have taken a shot if Blake had not. Another, identified as Cypher E156, said he was fractions of a second away from doing the same. One officer known as NX109 was perilously close to being run over after getting the finger of his glove caught in the Audi's door handle and just managed to wrench it free in time before the Audi surged forward, ramming into a Tesla. The prosecutor, Tom Little, KC, argued that Blake had misjudged the risk and exaggerated the threat to his colleagues in a statement following the shooting. But the defence, Patrick Gibbs, KC, said he wasn't RoboCop and made a split decision to save others. Despite his acquittal, Blake now faces the prospect of a disciplinary hearing brought by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Mr Kaba's parents said they're also considering to sue the MEP. The family understood to be taking legal advice which may include considering the grounds for appealing the verdict. Members of the family appeared shocked as the verdict was announced this afternoon. As I said, in an ongoing ordeal, Blake now faces a separate inquest into what happened, which could still be years away. As I said, last September, hundreds of Met Police firearms officers handed in their weapons following the decision to charge one of their colleagues with murder. In the wake of the mass revolt, Scotland Yard was forced to put the army on standby amid concerns that there would not be enough armed officers to keep the public safe on the streets of Britain. Most returned to their roles, but there was a widespread concern among firearms officers nationally when Blake was named ahead of a trial. The case has already had a catastrophic impact on recruitment of officers. In February, it emerged that just 6 people applied to be a firearms officer in Britain's biggest force. Usually, they would expect between 150 and 250 hopefuls applying every time this post is advertised. However, as I said, it emerged just 6 people applied. There's also been a collapse in interest for the voluntary role to bear arms to protect the public. The Met has about 2,500 authorised firearms officers who patrol the capital 24 hours a day to protect the public, and they are all volunteers and actually receive no extra pay. But between April and December last year, more than 250 of these authorised firearms officers left the unit. And without fresh applicants, there is mounting concern that police forces will struggle to recruit and retrain enough officers to keep the public safe. The National Firearms Police led a warning that Britain could be sleepwalking into a situation where officers who have been ordered to carry guns rather than volunteer for the specialist role. After the verdict today, Frank Ferguson, the head of the CPS, said, "First and foremost, I want to say my thoughts and those of the CPS remain with the family of Chris Kaba. Today, armed Met Police officer Martyn Blake has been found not guilty of the charge of murder, and we fully respect the jury's decision. This has been a complex and sensitive case, and the decision to prosecute was made after an in-depth consideration of all the available evidence. They recognise that firearms officers operate under enormous pressure, but it's our responsibility to put cases before the jury that meet our test for prosecution, and we are satisfied that test was met in this case. It is therefore right in this case that we put before the jury for them to scrutinise and to decide. They have carefully considered each piece of evidence, including video and Martyn Blake's own account. They have made up their minds in the proper way, and we thank them for doing so." The Independent Office for Police Conduct defended its decision to refer the shooting of Chris Kaba to the CPS after Met Firearms Officer Martyn Blake was cleared of murder. The director, Amanda Rao, said, "Firstly, we want to acknowledge Chris Kaba's family and friends today as they continue to grieve the death more than 2 years on. Our thoughts and sympathies remain with them and everyone else who's been affected. The past few weeks must have been incredibly difficult and distressing for Chris's family, who have sat through the trial, listened to all the evidence and witnessed his final moments played out in court. We also recognise the impact that this trial has had on the officers involved, as well as his firearms colleagues and the wider policing community. Today, a jury have considered all the evidence and have acquitted Police Sergeant Martyn Blake of murder." I just want to say rest in peace, Chris, and our condolences go out to your family. It's your boy GC. Keep it locked, keep it real.